Ok,
Sem
depois
problema.
eu edito.
Ok.
É 5, 4,
Okay, Nick.
3, ok,
Nick,
no
you
ar.
have the slides?
No, I don't. I haven't received them yet, I'm afraid. Sorry. Hasn't come through.
É 5, 4,
Okay, Nick.
3, ok,
Nick,
no
you
ar.
have the slides?
No, I don't. I haven't received them, I'm afraid. Sorry. Hasn't come through.
É 5, 4,
Somebody's introducing us first before we start?
3, ok, no ar.
Okay, sure.
No, I don't. I haven't received them, I'm afraid. Sorry. Hasn't come through.
É 5,
Somebody's introducing us first before we start? Okay.
3, ok, no ar.
Okay, sure.
Yes, I am. Can I start?
Ok, go.
Oh, okay. Well, technicalities. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to give you an extended and warm welcome to all of you to the 5th International Seminar on Research Training. The seminar is organized by the Research Group on Creativity and Teaching Innovation in Higher Education within the Graduate Program in Education at the Pontifical Catholic University of Paraná. My name is Pedro Flores. I am a cognitive psychologist, neuroscientist, and member of the research group. We have gathered here today to discuss peer support. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. I think, okay, you need to go into the original audio.
I can hear Pedro again now, but there was a gap. I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine now. It's fine now.
Well, we have gathered here today to discuss peer support for the development of competences in postgraduate students, a workshop designed for both supervisor and postgraduate research students. Joining me today are Dr. Elk Streck, Dr. Vijay Kumar, and Dr. Nicholas Baker, whom I now have the honor of introducing. Dr. Elk is an experienced educator and researcher with international work and research experience. She's in applied linguistics who brings her expertise to solving language-related problems in contexts such as post-graduation supervision and assessment practice, language education, and cross-cultural curriculum development. She is the president of the Australian Linguistics Association of Australia at the University of Canberra. She is engaged in research development across all stages of the research career. Dr. Vijay has more than 40 years of teaching experience. His research interests are in post-graduation development, feedback practices, doctoral examinations, and academic well-being. He's internationally recognized academic staff developer and has been invited to build doctoral supervisor capacities in 32 universities, such as 13 countries. He is the first person outside the UK to become a UK Council of Graduation Education recognized in supervision. And Dr. Nicholas is responsible for research development at the Graduation Research School and oversees and facilitates the Graduate Research School Workshop Program, specializing in research and developing writing, learning, teaching, technologically to optimize teaching practice and supervision feedbacks and pastoral care support of postgraduate students in higher education. On behalf of the research group and myself personally, I wish to express my gratitude for your presence this evening and for the privilege of being able to listen to you over the next few hours. Finally, I would like to remind you, dear seminar attendees, that at the end of our event, we will have a moment for questions and sharing of experiences. Therefore, do not hesitate to send in your comments during the broadcast. Once again, I'm immensely grateful to our guests for accepting our invitations. And now I pass the floor to Dr. Elk.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pedro, for your kind words of welcome. We're delighted to be with you in Brazil, albeit only online. And I think this is our first workshop in Brazil. So that is country number 33 for you, Vijay. And
Yep.
I have stopped counting. Anyway, we're delighted to be with you today and share some of our work. So our topic today is on peer support, peer groups, where peer mentoring takes place. And we're going to start by giving you a quick overview and then tell our story before we go into more theoretical matters. And this will be quite, we change speakers so that you get, so you can say, tuned and switched on, and then we will have time for discussion at the end. Nick, are you able to share the slides now? Excellent.
Wonderful.
Okay. Now, we've already covered that. Let's move on to our quick overview. And this is what we're going to do today. You will see in this outline here that we refer to competencies, sometimes also called competencies, / graduate attributes, because in our context, we often talk about graduate attributes when we talk about the skills, the set of skills that we want our graduates to have acquired when they exit the university with their degree. So we're going to use these terms simultaneously. Okay, let's move on to our story. Why are we interested in peer support groups, and how did our interest in peer support groups develop? Let's go to the next slide, and this is just to kind of remind you that when we do things, they all start somewhere, and stories start somewhere. So we're going back to the beginning of our story of peer support, the team actually that you're listening to today, Nick and Vijay and I, we have become peers, and we have become peers, by the way, through peer support groups. So we're going to give you some more personal details later on. But how did it start? For me, it started a long time ago, 20 years ago, and that is incredible. At the time, I was a new lecturer at the University of Otago in New Zealand, where Nick and Vijay are now working. And when I started, I was asked to work with 5 PhD students, and I was a brand new supervisor. I had not done supervision before as the primary supervisor. So because I don't know whether you've heard it, but I'm from German background, and that was not one of the tasks as a German lecturer at the time. So I had these 5 PhD students, one of whom, by the way, was Vijay, and we discussed lots of things. And I realized very quickly that those 5 students, they talked a lot with me, and we would have regular meetings, but there was little communication amongst them, even though they were good friends, but they didn't talk about research matters. And they would ask me the same questions, sometimes again and again. So I thought I'd do something about this lack of communication, so that students became aware of their fellows' research topics, so that they could share information about which workshops were of interest, which databases were useful, etc., etc. So I suggested to my 5 supervisors at the time, why don't we meet and discuss things? And the students were very interested in having these additional peer group meetings, in addition to the supervisory meeting that, of course, I continued having on a one-to-one basis. So basically, we explored topics that students wanted to discuss. We organized ourselves in roughly fortnightly meetings. I set up the framework, like the time. I booked the room. I chaired the meeting, at least at the beginning, but the students generated the topics in a brainstorming session. And then basically we discussed these different topics, similar to what I mentioned before about useful databases. It could also be a student sharing where he or she was stuck in the writing process. And I stepped more and more in the background as a facilitator. The students developed at Otago at the time such a strong sense of group identity in their peer support group that they even gave themselves a name, and they became PALC, the PhD Applied Linguistics Club at the University of Otago. So this is how strong they felt in that group as individual members. Later on, the students also welcomed guest members, like students who were not studying with me as their supervisor, but they welcomed them along, or maybe also when we had visiting fellows. So this group was my first peer group that I that I kind of stimulated and then facilitated over many years. And ever since, I've been involved in other peer support groups in Australia, where I'm working now. Now I'll hand over to Vijay, and he can tell us a little bit about his story.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Alka. And just like what you've listened just now, Alka was my supervisor.
I can't hear
and
Vijay.
Can you hear now? Can you hear, Nick? Yep, we can hear. Alka, are you okay? Can you hear? The others, can you hear? Pedro, are you able to hear? Just to make sure that everybody is hearing. Pedro, can you hear?
Loud and clear, Professor.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So as Alka was mentioning just now, Alka was my supervisor, and you'll see 3 generations here. Nick was my student. All right. So after I graduated from University of Otago, when I went back to Malaysia, I started another peer support group. And when I came back to New Zealand, okay, again, we had another group. So what we're talking about today is about 3 peer support groups. The one that LK started in New Zealand, and then I went on to start another peer group in Malaysia. And when Alka returned to Australia, she started another peer group. So that's what we are going to talk about today. And the membership, as Alka has mentioned, comprised of the students that we supervised. Okay, so these students whom we supervised, they come together and they got into a group, and this is the group that we call the peer support group. All right, okay, let's move on to the next slide. Nick, is this what you are doing? Okay, I seem to have lost there. Yeah.
I guess I'm on again because I can see the slide changing, but I could not hear what Vijay just shared.
Vijay indicated moving to the next slide, which is the one we have in front of us now.
Okay, thanks. Nick, I'm glad that I can hear you. I'm not quite sure why we have the problem with the audio. Anyway, thanks for sharing your story, Vijay. And we'll hear actually a little bit more about Nick a little bit later, also very strongly from the student perspective, because it's not that long ago that Nick was also a student. So just while you're listening, think about now whether you, for example, might have been involved in a peer support group in the past as a student, or maybe as a faculty member. If you're a faculty member, do you actually know whether your students are involved in some kind of peer support group, and what might be your story? Keep that in mind. We would love to hear from you at the end in the Q&A session. Okay, moving on. Let's now look a little bit about the theory around competency and or graduate attributes. Before we then look at why peer support groups are so important for their development. So competencies or graduate attributes are considered or are defined as skills, knowledge, and abilities of university graduates beyond the actual disciplinary knowledge, right? So we're not talking about what a student might need to know about educational leadership or applied linguistics. It's those other skills, sometimes also referred to as soft skills and communication, emotional IQ, etc., that we refer to. There is certain vagueness around these terms, and I guess the fact that we refer to competencies, graduate attributes, graduate skills, these are all terms which are being used by university to describe these skills. There's not a unified terminology around that. There is quite a kind of utilitarian background to graduate attributes. And the main pressure for their adoption was actually that universities wanted to make sure that their graduates find work after graduation. So there is a high emphasis on employability, because you can have the deepest knowledge of your chosen topic area, but if, for example, you cannot communicate it well, which would be one of the graduate attributes, you have a problem working in the real world, even working at the university. They're often seen as marker for quality university teaching. And in Australia, for example, universities get ranked for how they achieve their graduate competencies on a regular basis. They're also criticized because of the actual lack of theoretical underpinning. This probably has to do with these very pragmatic purpose of graduate skills, that universities wanted to make sure that their graduates are employable, but they didn't necessarily do the research when they actually defined those graduate attributes. And I guess that's why, researchers come in and need to do that. So if we move on to the next slide, please. You can see that because of the fact that often these ideas of graduate attributes are decided by the university and handed down to academics to achieve them, it can happen that this process is not successful. Top-down embedding of competencies often doesn't work because people might not understand the graduate attributes or might not embrace them. However, peer support groups can play a major role in this context. And before we come to that, let us also quickly define what we mean when we say peer support groups. Again, there might be different definitions for that and different understandings. And I do think it is a fluid concept, for example, when it comes to the membership of these groups. So in essence, it is a group of postgraduate students who meet, and they have various purposes to meet, often academic, but sometimes, of course, also social, which should not be underestimated. Sometimes these groups meet with their supervisor or their supervisors. As you heard in my story, when we started meeting, I was actually quite instrumental in getting that group running, but later on, I was no longer needed, which was great. What is important is to see that peer support group set their agenda themselves. So it's a genuine learner-centered approach. The students decide what they would like to discuss, advise each other on. So here we actually have a bottom-up understanding of how students think they should be developing. They're not handed over a list of graduate attributes, and then they are told, and now you should learn how to be a good communicator. You should, be a good organizer, etc. But the students recognize where their needs are, and they decide what they want to focus on. Okay, I think the next slide is about, I'm going to move on, is about a study that Vijay and I did about competencies or graduate attributes and the role of peer support groups in about 20 years ago or so. And Vijay, tell us about what did we find out about students' perspectives on graduate attributes?
Yeah, thank you very much. You can hear me well, Nick? All good? Okay, great. So just to give a quick recap of what LK has presented and just to make sure that we understand what the peer support group is. So the peer support group actually comprises of the students that we supervise. These students, they get together either with the supervisor present or without the supervisor present, and they try to upskill themselves with competencies that they require to ensure that not only they complete their studies, but also they have a life beyond the PhD. So say, for example, in some of the group, the students decided they want to learn how to write the literature review. So somebody in that group will do the research and then come and present. And at times the supervisor will be there, sometimes supervisor not there. So the students, they exchange their ideas. At times, the students may want to go for a conference. They may want to present and get feedback from their peers, and that's another of the activity. And as Alke said, besides the academic activities, there were also a lot of social activities. So when we did the study, when we conducted data from the three groups, the one from New Zealand, from Australia and Malaysia, we noticed that one of the number one things that the students said that they really valued was the communication skills. That is the communication, the competency in communicating. And why they valued this was that they had the opportunity to make presentations. So while making the presentations, there was performance feedback on research and presentation skills from their peers. So that was one of the key elements that they picked up. Then there was also the process of negotiating and diplomacy to make sure that their ideas are understood or their arguments are put forth in a much more convincing manner with justification. The other thing is that there's also the element of structures. When you do the presentation, what kind of structure should you have? Whether it's an oral presentation or a visual presentation. And more importantly, what they valued more in communication is the leadership skill. So within leadership skill, they learned to negotiate, they learn to take charge, but also to value and appreciate the ideas of others. So this was the number one skill that they valued, which we think is not only important while doing the study, but also beyond the studies. Next slide, Nick. The second skill that was really ranked very highly was this aspect of critical thinking, problem solving, inquiry, and innovation. So what the peer support group valued most was that when they presented these ideas to their friends, their ideas were actually challenged at times, and challenged in a good way, in the sense that they looked at it as formative and developmental, and what they had was a ready reader who's able to provide that feedback to them. So when they presented their ideas, the peer support group members asked for clarification and justification. And when this took place, what the peer support members felt best was that there was a critical scrutiny of their ideas, which is very, very important, especially when subsequently they take the draft to the supervisors or it goes to the examiners. So what actually happens here is that when these basic elements have been solved in the peer support group, the life of the supervisor becomes a little bit easier. Okay. Now, the other thing is that what was important was that whatever decisions that was made in the peer support group, these group members, they felt that their decisions were well informed, research-based, evidence-based. They critically evaluate it and they justify whatever they're doing, so that they found that their work or the ideas they are promoting to be solid and well justified. Next, Nick. Okay, a third thing was, of course, self-motivation. I'm sure most of you here will notice that sometimes the students, what my colleague Hyukan talks about, this roller coaster of the PhD journey. Sometimes they're so happy, sometimes they're so sad, sometimes they play victim and they wonder, are they doing the right thing? See, and the peer support groups that LK and I formed and we sort of got involved was really, really valuable in self-motivating the students. So when the students came to the peer support group meeting, and when they see many achievements of students who were struggling before, but now they're moving up the ladder, they felt happy and they felt that they're able to keep the momentum and also to work independently. They inspired each other. Okay, they supported each other and they provided motivation and also direction for their learning. So we had students coming and telling, look, I'm struggling with my literature review. And then there's another senior student telling, hey, guess what? I also struggle. But you know what? This is what I did and this is how I work. Come, let me guide you. So the fact that there was somebody available there actually motivated the student. Other than that, the students also valued the research and organization. So very often than not, in the initial stages of the candidature, students will come with a lot of literature review. Okay, a lot of papers, stacks and stacks and stacks of paper. I remember in one support group, this was an issue that was brought up, and Nick was there. He was in the peer support group. He said, hey, guess what? I have found a very unique, cool way how we can organize all this and how you can synthesize the ideas. And I still do not know what you did, Nick. Nick did, you did, but you did well, okay? So the students, what they do is they share best practices. They started messy, but then they became more organized. Their research was more organized. And what is important here is that they learned from each other. So the students did not come to the supervisor and start saying, oh, LK, I've got 101 articles. How do I organize? You know, that is, I don't think that's the job of the supervisor. We want to focus more on the scholarship at this level. And then you find that the students very, very strongly in terms of teamwork. They begin to work together. They knew how to negotiate. They knew how to lead and also how to follow. And I think these are very important skills that are useful beyond the studies. So from these examples that I've given, what is really important and that what LK has highlighted is that the supervisors are not able to disseminate all these skills. Okay, we have our limitations. And within the peer group support members, there are many who may have strengths that could be utilized to share ideas and to help the students learn. Okay, move on, Nick. I think that would be LK's slide.
I think we're actually
Okay.
moving on to Nick.
Yeah, wonderful. And as I said, Nick was my student, so he's a third generation here. Okay, and Nick led a very, very successful peer support group at the University of Otago. And so I'm going to ask Nick to share. All yours, Nick.
Thank you, VJ. And hopefully everyone can hear me. LK and VJ, give me a thumbs up if you can.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's just go right into some of these programs I provided as peer support that originally were inspired by VJ and obviously inspired from his amazing journey with LK. So let's go to the first group that I ran, which was the writing group. So what I formed was a writing group that happened every Monday for 2 hours. We used the Pomodoro technique, which is basically shut up and write, where we at the beginning would share our intentions of writing. We would write for 20 minutes silently. Then for 5 minutes, we would rest, chat, maybe even share questions to get help and support. This group also invited guests. As you can see in this image, we had a guest, Nave, who shared his experiences as an academic writer, giving us tips and tricks for the first 20 minutes during that session. This group occurred for over 3 years during my PhD. With VJ's guidance, I started it. What we did, we started getting together with other postgrads. And what we had was I sent out an email a week before the session started. We booked a room in the facility, and then we ran the writing group. And this was a great space to just have a moment to write, to schedule to write with others. Writing is a social act. We're social people. So it's great to have others there. They motivate us to write. And it's a great space to learn from others if we invite someone to share their amazing experiences. And during that time, we built a family, friends, social connections. Many of the original people in this group actually are still with me today as we transformed that group from HEDC to the Graduate Research School. So now we do it at the Graduate Research School every Monday, same time, same theme. And we have the original members still there with new individuals from the Graduate Research School, creating a family, and we support each other and help each other. Also, one other point I like to mention, when you're creating a writing group or any of these social groups, it is very key to have an anchor, someone who leads the group, leads the organization, leads the emailing and setting up the room. There's an old saying, if you create it, they will come. So you need someone who's there as that anchor, and that can be shared amongst the members. So let me just go to our next group that we created. So building that family relationship, that community, what we did was also we created another group called the HEDC Movie Nights. This was a great space that we created once a month, where we would all get together, we would share getting some food together, or we'll all pitch in with a bit of money to buy some food. We would come together, relax, just be a family, have some food together, and then we would watch a movie, or where we would play maybe board games. And this event was actually a very powerful event to share experiences, the good times, the bad times. And it's amazing what you learn from others' life experiences and helping you with the journey, because many of these individuals in this photo were not only at different stages of their PhDs, but also from different departments. And we also had staff that came along and joined in. We had other professors who would come and join us in this event. And also, many of these members in this photo were part of the writing group, and also whenever they can join in the writing group that are here at the Graduate Research School. So let me take us to another slide. The other group that I formed, which is called the Feedback Group. This group is another team family group of members from the HEDC where we work together every second or every week. We would come together for 2 hours. We would work on some of our writing as a feedback group. So we had some rules where you would bring in maybe 5 pages of something you're working on. You would pair up with someone else, and you both will share your writing with each other, read it, and provide some feedback. And the feedback is always based around giving positive feedback, what was good about the writing, and what could be done to enhance that goodness even more, and also provide some critical feedback. What was hard about the writing? What was difficult? And perhaps how it could be improved. This group was very successful. We had 4 to 8 members, and this was a great way not only to get together and have a moment to work, but also to develop your feedback skills. As many of you know, one of the key skills of an academic is to provide feedback. So this was a great space to build those skills and build those lifelong connections. So this was another group that we formed, and that was also incredibly successful, a part of our journey, and that still continues today in another form, usually via Zoom, after hours, with some of the same members. So these are 3 of the different groups that I formed. And just on the side, when we talk about graduate attributes, these skills helped me immensely to build my skills in management and leadership. That helped me in a previous role where I was managing a project for a company that was government funded, that became very successful, and is helping me even today in developing the groups for the Graduate Research School. And I am very grateful for these groups because I still learn. And I'm always thinking about the generation effect, thanks to Elke, thanks to VJ, and now with my workshop that I'm developing shortly about feedback and writing groups, hopefully I will get the 4th generation to start their own journey. And maybe they will talk to me fondly as I talk about VJ and Elke and their support in my journey. So I believe that is the last slide for me. Coming back to VJ and Elke, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share, and I'll bring it back to you too.
Thanks so much.
Okay, this is yours. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. It's quite amazing, isn't it? I guess you have all heard the feeling of the personal component of our working together as academics over the last, I don't know, 20, 25 years.
Yes.
So what started as a kind of enterprise, getting people together, and which we then called peer support group, has really led to an amazing ripple effect across generations and across continents and countries and universities. And you can see the impact of all this right now with the three of us sharing our experience today. So I guess this is how true collaboration can really be facilitated. For your self-reflection, or maybe later on for the Q&A, just look at this question here and think about also beyond this seminar today, about the role of graduate attributes, skills, etc. At the university that you are based on. We would love to hear from you. What is the role of those skills at your uni? And can you see how peer support groups, in whatever shape or size you might choose to facilitate one, could actually help students to develop those important skills, in addition to writing that thesis? And most importantly, can we inspire you to think about what role you might be playing in establishing and running a peer support group in your particular context? And that is, I guess, where the real work starts, but it's such a rewarding work, as you can tell, that we highly encourage you to think about that. Okay, let's slowly
Next slide, Nick.
sum up why we wanted to focus today on peer support groups from that particular angle, and show how they can be really helpful to students to develop their competencies or graduate attributes. We did this because, first of all, we did the study 10 years ago, of which I put a copy into the chat, where we actually heard from the students themselves how useful these peer support groups were to develop certain competencies, as BJ reported. So it's not only a group where, yes, we can meet and have fun and watch movies, etc., which is a great thing to do, but there's so much more happening in that space because the social comes with the academic side of things. We believe that peer support groups are underrated, that they don't take place often enough because they do help students to develop the skills that they need upon graduation, or hopefully earlier, in addition to their academic skills and academic knowledge about their chosen research topic. So they complement, they do not replace, but they really complement the content-specific knowledge of the PhD study, and that's our focus today. And they also help, by the way, with building that knowledge of these PhD project, as the examples that Nick, for example, shared show, where students help each other with writing, literature review, organizing information, etc. But you can clearly see that the emotional support that such groups offer are very crucial for students to experience. I guess that emotional support has become maybe even more front and center of the PhD journey, given the stresses that we have all experienced during the recent pandemic. In that peer relationship, so the peer support leads, of course, to relationships between the peers. And the peers here, by the way, are not only the students, but also the supervisors. So all this builds up to a respectful peer-to-peer relationship between the student, the supervisors, and it paves the way for ongoing mentoring between the students, the supervisor, for what can be a very long time, as you can tell from our little group. And I hand over back to Vijay for some concluding thoughts.
Yeah, next slide, Nick. Okay, so thank you, Elke and Nick, for sharing with us. So I think one of the key things that you need to remember as you supervise your PhD students is that very often than not in the literature is reported that PhD is often a lonely journey. And this is a number one thing that is highlighted in the literature on doctoral education and doctoral supervision, and quite recently, as in the past 10 years, you notice that there's a lot of mental health issues that are being reported in the literature. And this happens mainly because the student is left on their own. And I think through this peer support group, this is one way to sort of solve this problem. From our research, we also know that the peer support groups actually provide a positive experience. Just like what Nick was explaining, in the end, they started as friends. I always say that, friends are strangers you first meet, and in the end, they become like families. And this is exactly what is happening. LK and I have been colleagues now for more than 30 over years, and Nick is joined us, and it's all building and stuff like that. I think the peer support groups, most importantly, it has got a lot of value to supervisors too, and it also helps in building the supervisory relationship. The reason being is that supervisor will not have to feel that they have to take the full responsibility of the development of the student, but they can share this responsibility with other students. So it is more of co-construction of knowledge rather than the transmission of knowledge, rather than the transmission of competencies, but rather we are learning together. There could be some students who may have specific skills that we may want to learn. And we also know as academics that knowledge is always contestable. Okay, and that's exactly what we want to inculcate in our postgraduate students. And the first point where they realize that knowledge is contestable in a safe environment is with their peers. And once they know that their knowledge is challenged and how they can justify the knowledge, that makes it a lot easier for them when they come and meet the academics or when they meet the examiners. Another most important thing is that supervisors, when the students are working in the peer support group and learning the key competencies where they are mentored by each other, the supervisor can focus on the HOT skills, that is the higher order thinking skills. So I don't have to deal with issue like, look, how do I do a literature review? How do I write this? How do I do that? Because all this can be done in the peer support group. But when you come and see me, let's talk about your ideas, not the nitty-bitty gritty things, which can be resolved in the peer support group. So why this is important? By having this peer support group, supervisors can focus on the higher order thinking skills, or what many of us call the doctorateness, and not on the other little thing. Now, we also need to know supervisors cannot be the masters of all competencies. There are things I know, there are things I do not know, and that's that makes life so beautiful. All right. Now, the peer support groups, what is really important is that it's not going to take away the role of the supervisor. It's a complementary group that actually empowers the students. When the students are empowered, that makes it a lot easier for the supervisors to focus on the scholarship of teaching and learning. Okay, Nick, move on. I think that's all that we have. Okay, I think you can stop sharing the slide and we can go for Q&A. Thank you. All right,
Thanks,
all
Vijay.
yours now for the Q&A.
Hi, can you see me?
Yeah, lovely.
First and foremost, I would like to thank you all. I was looking and my head was spinning of so much interesting information. Then I was, oh, this is Q&A time. I need to host it. Right. So I'm gonna make the questions. Some people send not many questions, but questions that I believe are good for starting conversation. So like we said we would do in the beginning, I will make the questions in Portuguese and José will translate it for me. José, should I change my translation channel? Okay. First question. Como é feita essa seleção para estruturar os grupos de estudo em pares? Como é organizado?
Can you hear anything, Nick? Or do we need to switch to something?
I heard the question. So it was about how do you structure the group? How do you invite people into the group? which is a very good question.
Yeah,
Okay, you want to take that or yeah?
yeah,
I
I'm
can't
happy.
hear you, okay?
You can't hear me?
Okay.
You can.
I can.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah,
I
so
can hear LK
yes,
now. Okay, let's see.
the little Portuguese that we understand. So this is about selection and organization. If I read the question correctly, I think there's not a one-size-fits-all approach here. You could see that the first example that I gave was the selection was not a selection. It was just I was tasked to supervise 5 students as a new staff member. So that selection was not really my selection. It was given to me, and that was the group. Of course, I invited the students at the time to join that group, and they had the option to say no, or no thanks, or maybe only sometimes. And I do remember one student who only joined from time to time, and that is perfectly okay. So as for the selection, I do believe that also, as Nick emphasized, it is good to have someone, I think you called that person an anchor. I often refer to the facilitator who facilitates the group, especially at the beginning. So someone needs to take on that responsibility and get the group going. But later on, when the group has found their rhythm of maybe meeting fortnightly or weekly or whatever it is, you can probably step back in that role or move the chairing of the session, for example, on so that it's on a rotating basis. Organization, I think in most peer support groups, the organization of the logistics, like booking the room or setting the time, is often done by that initial facilitator or anchor before things become kind of they just happen. But I think that's about it. As for the topics and the content, I don't organize. I might make suggestions, but given the learner-centeredness of the peer support group, topics need to be organized and decided upon by the group. Otherwise, it would defeat the purpose of actually wanting to empower the student. Yeah, so that's from me when it comes to structure and organization. Anything that you would like to add, Vijay?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we can add, Elke, is that, I mean, in terms of structuring an invitation, I think maybe the person who asked the question was quite confused about recruitment and selection of participants. So the students, the peer support group, say, for example, Pedro, you're a supervisor and you're supervising 3 or 4 students. These are the students who become members of the peer support group of the students that they're supervising. Now, an extension of that is that, say, for example, Nick is also in your university and he is supervising another 4 students. You can tell Nick, hey, look, why don't we get both our students together and then they can form a peer support group. But what you do, as LK has suggested, is that our job is to initiate and tell them how the group works. And then the students, they meet among themselves and they decide how often they want to meet, where they want to meet, and the topics they want to meet. So when I was a student, I mean, my group was the first group that LK formed. And when LK asked us, look, what is it that you guys want to know about? And the first thing I asked was, I said, look, LK, I need to know how examiners mark the thesis, because I was at the point of submitting. And of course, LK said, look, very good. Why don't you lead the topic? So I had to go and read the research on examiner reports, and I presented. And of course, all my colleagues benefited. So that's how the topics were generated, and that's how it was organized. So in the beginning of the year, we'll meet, we'll have about 10 topics. We'll all discuss who wants to do what and stuff like that. And we take the leadership to present those topics. Okay, thank you. Next question, Pedro.
Okay, next question. Essa autorregulação da motivação foi baseada na teoria do Zimmerman, da autorregulação da aprendizagem?
I know this takes us to self-regulated learning and Zimmerman, as I would call him, but I don't get the gist of the question. Can we translate, please?
What was the question? I didn't hear the question. Nick, did you hear the translation?
It's about I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
What is the
yeah,
question?
that's okay. So it's all about the question was somewhere around self-regulation, about motivation in Zimmerman's theory. Perhaps it was around how do you self-regulate and motivate the group to get it started and perhaps continuing. Is that what was? Yeah. Elke, Vijay, did you hear me give that?
Yeah, yeah, I heard the
Mhm.
question. Yeah.
Mm.
Elke, did you hear the question?
Yes, I still have issues with the audio. See, I'm not quite sure whether I get the question fully, but in the end, I think the question about the motivation and self-regulation goes back to each individual member of the group. And given that they choose to be a member of that group, they already start out with a high level of motivation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, I guess. And the self-regulation happens then through the activities that the students themselves choose. So I think I like actually this connection to self-regulation and peer support groups. We didn't explore that in the study that we presented today, but there are clear there are links to motivation, and I think Vijay reported on that.
Yeah.
Could be very interesting, next step kind of research. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just add on to that? I think in the group that I mean, as a member of as one of the pioneer member of the group, and subsequently as someone who facilitated another 2 groups and stuff like that, I think I understand what you mean by self motivation, self regulation, stuff like that. I think the key element here is that within the group, you need to have a set of rules saying that, look, you need to be kind to each other. Okay, which I think is very important, and you also need to encourage each other. So if you have, for example, somebody presenting and you're listening in the group as a member, don't become too critical. It's perfectly okay to be critical, but be formative, not destructive. Okay, and I think these little words of kindness actually provides the self-confidence for the members who are starting off or beginning and who are struggling. And I think in the work of a feedback that Elke and I have done, one of the key terms that we use is what is called sugaring the pill. That is, always say something nice first, and then make a suggestion, and then end off with something nice. Now, this has got to do with a little bit of self-determination motivation theory, but this works when you encourage and support the person. Then that person feels that they are growing, and they will come again and again for the next peer support group meeting because they feel respected and valued. So that's how in my personal case, that's how I got the self-regulation in that sense, as when I was a PhD student. Okay, next question, Pedro. Nick, you'll have to tell me the question because I can't yet.
So we have 2 more questions. Jose, to avoid further problems in audio, I'm going to read it directly in English. I translated that. Apparently, professors can hear me. Yeah, they can hear me. Okay. What were the difficulties in forming a peer group, and how did you manage to overcome them?
So what were the difficulties in forming a peer group, and how did you overcome them? Great question. Elke, Vijay?
Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe Nick.
You first,
Maybe Nick, you want to.
I think possibly in my experience, the difficulties in forming a peer group, it can be getting people to first start joining the group. There were what we called false starts for the writing group because I struggled to get people to join in. But the way I overcame that was just, talking face to face with a few of our PhD candidates, just letting them know what I was intending to do, the benefits of it, the motivations of working with others, having a scheduled time and working on a focused task that can lead to getting work done, getting tasks done, helped me to overcome that false start and get the group going. So yes, there are going to be issues like that that may limit or be restrictive, but if you're persistent and being clear about what could be the motivation and benefits of the group, you will get it started and it will start working from there. That was one of the challenges I faced, and that's how we overcame it. Alki, Vijay, you might have some
Sure.
experience.
I think one of the things to the person who asked the question, I mean, I think from my experience, both as a member of a group and as a staff who help in the group, please don't have very high expectations. Okay. If you have 10 students, don't expect the 10 students to come and join the group and stuff like that, which I think is not something that you always remember, this is voluntary. People come because if they find that value, they'll come. A second thing is that make sure that whatever activities that the group does, everyone feels that they get some value out of it. Okay. That's the most important thing. There's no point coming and having mundane things just for the sake of reporting or just for the whatever it is. Make sure whoever comes to the group, they feel that there is some value there. Maybe they're learning a little bit about writing a paragraph for today, for example, or next day they're learning about how do I articulate my ideas. Simple. All yours, Elke?
I think you have said it all. So I think the difficulty at the beginning, getting the group started, is, as Nick described, a challenge because students are busy. They are very conscious of their time and their time investment. So when, someone comes and says, "Hi, we're having another group and another meeting every 2 weeks or something," there might be a certain reluctance to add that task to their already very busy agenda. So I think it has to be explained well, and it has to show the value of that. I think once you persevere and have the group running, albeit maybe with small members, and people see and get the value out of it, the problem is overcome, because do remember that students talk with each other. So they will actually say, well, this is actually time well invested, and this is what we really want to do. And I think you know that you have succeeded when you have a regular, it doesn't mean each time, group of people coming and they want to be there. At Otago, when actually the group decided to give themselves a name, showed a very strong sense of identity and wanting to be a member of that group. So how do you overcome it? You overcome it by having clear ideas of what students will gain, the value, and also don't forget that there will be ups and downs. You just persevere and keep on meeting. You don't give up just because maybe you have a meeting where you only had maybe one attendee.
And just on that, those ups and downs, for that writing group that we had, those numbers would fluctuate between 3 core people to up to 20 people. So it will fluctuate, and it's okay. It's okay. As long as you're enjoying it and it gives value to others, 3 people, 2 people, it's okay.
I think so. If you have 3 people who gain additional knowledge, additional skills out of such a meeting, in addition to your regular one-to-one supervisor meeting, I think that is a great value add. Yeah. So, yeah.
All yours, Pedro. Any more questions?
Okay, we have one more question. In case one of you are not listening, I will send the text to. This last question was made when you were talking about autonomy, and Hockey asks, how to deal with colleagues who perceive this autonomy of student as a threat, the false notion that they will lose their PhD status?
Well,
I didn't get.
Well, that is, it's in the chat, Vijay. That is an amazing question. I would like to think that the group of colleagues who perceive autonomy of a student as a threat is a very, very small group. It contradicts the whole goal of a PhD journey, which is about allowing the student, supporting the student to become an autonomous, independent researcher. This is the PhD journey. It is about becoming a researcher. How can you become a researcher if you do not develop your autonomy? So I guess in a case like this, I would invite this person for chat and share my ideas about what I think the goal of the doctorate is. And autonomy certainly features big in that journey. PhD status takes us back to this whole idea of relationship building, but also between the student and the supervisor. You will have heard in what we've said so far that we are strong advocates of a peer-to-peer-like relationship between student and supervisor. So while, of course, we do recognize that, especially at the beginning of the PhD journey, the expertise is a little bit unbalanced, and one would expect, and rightly so, to the supervisor to have deeper knowledge in the area that is being researched. That will change. The knowledge of the student will go up, and they should actually overtake their supervisor at some stage. Yes, we do recognize there is an imbalance in terms of knowledge at the beginning. There's also an imbalance in terms of power, because it is the supervisor who plays a different role from the student. But all this does not prevent us to advocate a respectful peer-to-peer-like relationship between candidate and supervisor from day one of their candidature.
Now, I'll just add on before we finish. Okay, I think one of the things that I see in this question is that, see, when you're supervising a doctoral student, one of the most important two things you need to remember is that you are not looking at what is called a transmission of knowledge. You're talking about co-construction of knowledge, meaning you're learning together. And when you're learning together, you're learning in a peer-to-peer, respectful peer-to-peer kind of a relationship. The second thing is that when you're supervising a student, I think as a supervisor, you will feel successful if you empower your student and you want your student to know more than you, that empowerment. I'll just give you a simple example. I come from Malaysia, and Nick was one of my first PhD students in New Zealand. And when I was supervising students in Malaysia, my students will call me Dr. Vijay, Dr. Vijay, Dr. Vijay. And of course, I had that perception for 15, 20 years. And when I came to New Zealand and I was supervising Nick, and I told him, Nick, I want you to read this article and come. And when he came for the first meeting, he was talking about something and I was talking about something. He just looked at me and he said, Vijay, you've got it all wrong. Now, I got a shock. One, he did not call me doctor. He just called me Vijay. And I'm the teacher and he's telling me that I've got it all wrong. That was culturally shocking for me. But then I realized that I have got everything wrong all this while. When I was in Malaysia, I used to tell my students what to do, my PhD students. And then I realized if I'm supervising Nick, I cannot be doing that. I need to work with him so that he develops as a scholar. And look at him now. I used to do workshops on writing, but now he knows more than me. And I ask him, hey, Nick, I don't know about this. Can you advise me on this? And when I do that, I don't feel ashamed or whatever. I feel proud that Nick is doing better than me. And so I feel successful as a supervisor because I have empowered Nick, and I'm looking forward to the fourth generation. All right, all yours, Nick.
Yeah, go on, Nick.
Wow. All I can say is thank you so much, Vijay. I really appreciate that. Yes, I'm just also the only other thing I could mention on top of what Vijay has just said, during your journey, there are going to be moments where you will be the mentor, and there will be moments where your supervisors will be the mentor. But role will shift because each of you have different experiences and different knowledge. Just embrace those moments, realize in those moments when you can share great knowledge to help others and when they will share great knowledge to help you. That just be aware of those moments and enjoy those moments, because you are colleagues. You both are colleagues who have different knowledge to share to make the project work, to empower the project. And one other point I would like to share is, this is what I share during my workshop induction for PhD, is that it is your project. You are the leader, but as the leader, you surround yourself with experts who have powerful knowledge to help you succeed in the project. Respect their knowledge as they respect yours, for together you will succeed. I hope that
All
helps.
right, thank you. Okay, all yours, Pedro. Somebody wrote something about you, about your therapy for you, Pedro. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, Professor Vijay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I would just like to make a little comment on what you just said. I understand what you're saying, and I come from a student perspective because Professor Jomeri, our group leader, even wrote that on the comments, saying that she wanted her students to be empowered. And I remember that one day I worked with her for 2 years as an initiation scientific student. And she told me, Pedro been studying this topic for 2 years, and he understands this better than I. And as a cognitive psychologist, I take a very interest in the research identification, understanding
Identity,
that, oh,
okay.
okay, identity, thank you, that I am a researcher. And in that moment, I felt that I was in the research shoes. So I take great pleasure to hearing this from a counselor perspective and having myself this student experience. Well, I believe we have no more questions, so we're going we're approaching the conclusion of this event. And first and foremost, I would like once again to thank you all for this night. It's been an excellent evening filled with many reflections. Like I said, my head was spinning, and I believe that I speak in name of everyone here. And before I start giving some information about our next lecture, I would like to invite you for closing words.
Okay, I'll start. Pedro, thank you so much for taking us through this multilingual session, which gave a special touch to our seminar. I think the seminar was great. I loved the comments at the end. I guess we would all love to discuss and interact more, but I think we've made the best of this Zoom YouTube meeting. Yeah, great to be here today, and thank you so much for joining us on your Thursday evening. Over to you, Vijay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Pedro. I think I remember the name. Beatrice has been organizing, and Dale and everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us. And LK and I look forward to more sessions. We are more than happy to do more Zoom sessions or face-to-face or whatever. So because we have been doing a number, I think during the COVID, LK, Nick and I, we actually conducted, I think, 10 Zoom workshops in 12 countries about how to provide feedback in doctoral supervision. Maybe there's something that you might be interested in some point in time, and we'll be more than happy to do that for you. All yours, Nick. So thank you very much for inviting us and introducing us to colleagues from that part of the world. It's nice to meet all of you, even though we only get to see your names. Hi, Santiago.
I usually not usually when we are organizing our conference, I don't enter. I let the students do the conference, but this time I need to enter because I'm very, very, how can I say, emotionally affected about what you said. Okay, because it's not easy to make the group share because people they don't want to. Sometimes they have difficult. They enter in a PhD program as to compete. Sometimes it's something like that, but hearing you, how can I say, I feel motivated to continue to keep doing this. Thank you very much to keep trying to do this. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we try to make this conference in presence, face to face. For the next year, we didn't get the sources for this, but we will keep trying, and I hope to bring you here in Brazil to know PUC-PR our university. Thank you very much.
We would
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
day.
Bye. Have a
Thank you.
good evening. Take care. Bye.
Before we
Yes,
you.
end it,
Yes.
for our
Yes, can do it.
souvenirs, before we end it, I would like to remember all that our next lecture on the seminar will take place on October 5th at 7 p.m. in Brazil time. The lecture is titled The Guidance Process in Quantitative and Qualitative Research, a Significant Challenge. And it will be presented by Dr. José Vladimir Freitas de Fonseca, professor at the Federal University of Paraná, UFPR. We invite everyone to share our event and to join us over this coming week for further insights into research training. And now, without further ado, I extend my thanks once more to everyone for their presence, and I wish you all an excellent evening and night.